Welcome to episode 9 of SyrupCast, Canada's only source for maple bacon flavored mobile goodness. This week, we talk Wind Mobile, the CRTC questioning Rogers and Bell and Videotron over their mobile TV practices, a class action lawsuit against Bell about their prepaid policies, and why can't Shaw sell their spectrum to Rogers? That and lots of wearable stuff, talk about Windows Phone 8.1, and some sneak preview shots of the Blackberry Passport. As always, I'm joined by my co-host Douglas Soltis. Hello, sir.
Ahoy, hoy.
And the lovely Jane McIntaggart. How are you this week?
Hello, I'm good.
So we are approaching September, the busiest month of the year when it comes to phone releases. So we don't really have a lot of stuff to talk about in that regard this week. But we do have a lot of back-to-school stuff, a lot of regulatory stuff, and some generally Canadian goodness. So let's get started. Jane, you're on Wind. Today they launched two really big new products. They launched new roaming prices for their domestic roaming service, and they also launched a new Wind 35 plan, which gives unlimited talk, text, and data for $35 in their home network. So combined, those are some pretty compelling offers from what they want to be Canada's fourth national carrier. So we've heard a lot about this, the growth of the company. They're up to 750,000 subscribers across Canada. What do you think? Is this going to propel them into that next stage?
Possibly. I think still this is awesome news. I think it's great. I think still their biggest problem is that I don't know if they have the infrastructure to support 750,000? I know that I don't know if any other Wind users have this problem. But when I'm downtown in Toronto during the day on a weekday, so I feel like Wind's peak times are now like anywhere between 9 and 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, which sucks because you can't get data, you can't get anything. So I think when I was writing about this, I was like, no, like the $35 plan for students. All I was thinking about as a Wind customer was, this is going to make more people switch to Wind, and as a Wind customer, I'm like, no, that's bad. Like, it's going to make it worse for the rest of us. And I think that's a huge problem. It's like they can lower the prices. Their roaming prices are amazing now. They're awesome. And I'm still like, this is bad news for me as a Wind customer because it means there's going to be more pressure and more weight on the network.
So there already is. You're actually telling me that, like in cable days of past, at peak times, the actual network slows to a crawl. And
yeah, during the day, like downtown Toronto, it's awful.
Just let's give a bit of background here. Every carrier has a bunch of spectrum that they can assign to downlink and uplink traffic. Wind has 20 megahertz in southern Ontario. So where we are, they have 10 megahertz down and 10 megahertz up in most of the GTA. And that allows them to run AWS traffic over their network. AWS is great for speed, but it's not really that good for penetration. So if you're in a basement or if you're in a thick old building with thick concrete walls, you may not get the best reception. But that is separate as well to what we call tower or sort of modem
coverage.
When the network is rammed and there's so many people trying to connect to a single tower, that makes that tower run slower, just like any other network. The difference is that Wind actually has far fewer towers than Rogers, Bell, and Telus in the GTA. So even though they have the same idea of coverage, one tower probably stretches further than the equivalent tower from the incumbent. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, I don't think that hundreds of thousands of people are going to automatically join Wind.
No, but
it does pose a problem.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I've seen because I've been on Wind for for years, and it's one of the things that I've noticed as it's become, I guess, more popular and more of a valid choice for people. As like, yeah, because they're trying to be the fourth carrier, and definitely when people ask me like, oh, what carrier you're on, like, what do you recommend? I know I have people moving over from Ireland, and they're saying, what do you recommend? And definitely I tell them to consider Wind, just because from a value point of view, that they're unbeatable. I think they're exactly where everyone else should be when it comes to their prices and what they offer, but their network just sucks during the day.
The saddest mobile experience you can have in Toronto is trying to tether to a Wind device.
Yeah, Doug has seen me do that multiple times during the day, like from like a cafe. He's like, "Oh, are you gonna tether on your terrible network?"
Well, okay, so there's one thing to note. Wind has upgraded most of their towers in the GTA to what's called dual channel or dual carrier HSPA+. So remember back in the day, Telus touted this double speed network before LTE existed. They said that it's basically using the same hardware, the same network technology, but it's a software update that they issued that allows them to combine two cell sites or combine two paired network bits essentially into a single bit, so that you can get 42 megabits of speed in the downlink. So when you're downloading something, you get 42 megabits. Now, that doesn't mean that it's always going to be that fast, but Wind has now doubled the potential network capacity for its customers, which is pretty good. It doesn't reach those LTE speeds, but Doug, would this get you to switch to Wind? Is there any way now that Jane has told you that you couldn't really use your phone between 7 to 7, 9 to 5 even?
You can still use it to make phone calls and send text messages, but who does that anymore?
What?
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me.
So the reality of that is that I make all my phone calls and send all my text messages from my laptop.
Using Rogers One number.
Using Rogers One number or iMessage or Skype, essentially, which I'm sure I'll be doing even more of with iOS 8. But
so biased.
I think for me, no, it's just an update's going to come and it's going to provide more functionality for me. But I think for me the concern is kind of echoing what Jane was saying, and just threading it back to what we've talked about on previous podcasts. Is this something? Is the availability of this pricing something that the big three carriers can take as an example of great national Canadian competition? Like, is this something that can be used in their argument against the need for, Wind getting more spectrum, or the need for a merger to have a fourth major, because Wind is able to provide, I get Jane's concerns about just the user crunch and how that might affect if this becomes really popular. But for me, the larger concern is this impeding the CRTC's kind of like stated goal of having a fourth major, because the other carriers can point to, with what Bell had been doing in dropping the roaming fees, Wind doing something similar, offering better rates. Is this an indication of, prices being driven down through competition?
Well, no, because Wind does this every year. They've done this.
They do it every Christmas. They do it, yeah.
Yeah, they launch these $35 all-in plans every year. The difference is that this is the first time that it's been really compelling, because with lower per-use roaming rates, instead of leaving Toronto to go to the cottage and having access to only edge data, which costs $1,000 a gigabyte, now you have 3G data up to 42 megabits in speed, the same as their home network, at 5 cents a megabyte, which is $50 a gigabyte or $25 for 500 megs, which is exactly the same as Rogers charges on pay per use for their prepaid plans. And that's not a coincidence. The Industry Canada, they basically they talked with the government and they made a change to the Telecommunications Act earlier this year as an interim stopgap towards the CRTC regulating domestic roaming rates. And what they did was they limited the price of domestic roaming that incumbents can charge the new entrants to what they charge their own customers on a prepaid basis. So $25 for 500 megabytes, that's been the price Rogers has been charging their prepaid customers for like 4 years now. I mean, the price hasn't dropped for Rogers customers either, but what this allows people to do is leave the city and not have to worry that they're not going to be able to surf the internet. And $50 per gig is not great, but it's certainly a hell of a lot cheaper than what they were charging before. So this is a huge...
I feel like if they offered, because right now they have like an awesome, they have the US unlimited roaming, and that's amazing. I know why, but I'm assuming it's because they don't have a great roaming partner here in Canada. But if they could offer, I feel like, an unlimited roaming package for Canada, I feel like they would be unstoppable.
Well, that's the whole point, is that Rogers won't give them cheaper rates than that, so they'd have to eat the difference in price.
Massive,
which is not tenable.
huge.
Well, I did an interview with the CEO of Explora recently, and they offer the phone rental service for people traveling to the United States, and we talked a bit about Wind, or in our original write to Explora, a lot of mobile Syrup readers offering Wind as an example of a carrier with some great U.S. roaming options, and Explora CEO likened it to T-Mobile, where the kind of like the sub-major carriers are further incentivized to offer great international roaming, simply because they're looking for customers in metropolitan areas that, when they travel to other metropolitan areas, which can be outside of the country. So I think that's, Wind has kind of made that a priority, because they can speak to that Toronto customer that's spending 3 weeks out of the year or 4 weeks out of the year in DC or Washington, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know a lot of people who spend tons of time in the States where they changed to that $39 unlimited US plan before it expired a few weeks ago, and that's a great plan, because T-Mobile actually has T-Mobile is a better roaming partner than Rogers, and T-Mobile doesn't even exist in Canada. So they treat Wind like any other MVNO. So they have a ton of MVNOs in the U.S. Roam Mobility, which is one of our favorite companies to get roaming plans from. They are an official MVNO, even though they're a Canadian company. And what it means is that they get access to premium rates from T-Mobile. And that's something that, it's very important to note, that Wind doesn't have to negotiate the same way with T-Mobile that they do with Rogers, because T-Mobile wants that extra traffic on their network. They need that extra money, because there's actually a sense of competition in the U.S. T-Mobile keeps undercutting Sprint, they keep undercutting AT&T and Verizon, whereas until recently, Rogers, Telus, and Bell had no incentive to lower their roaming costs.
Yeah, and Wind has an incentive to seek out a partner to offer that in a compelling way, right? And I said Washington D.C. I meant D.C. and New York, but
what's
more
important about this change? It's a first step towards an unlimited 3G package in Canada, but it's also a precursor to the CRTC actually regulating domestic roaming rates. And what we saw is that during this whole the CRTC's investigation into domestic roaming, they discovered that the average price per megabyte that incumbents are charging the new entrants for roaming is about 3.7 cents per megabyte. So we have this situation where now Wind is charging its customers 5 cents per megabyte based on Rogers fees. They could potentially try to get on Bell and Telus' good side and offer cheaper rates, and we don't know that's possible as well, because now, as we spoke a couple of weeks ago, it's no longer legal to enter into an exclusivity agreement with a new entrant if you're an incumbent. But we also have Quebecor, Videotron, on the sidelines saying, we're not going to expand nationally until the CRTC regulates domestic roaming rates to 0.01 cents a megabyte, or even 0.005 cents a megabyte, which is much, much cheaper. It's basically the big difference. It's the wholesale rates that these companies have been pushing for in the cable and DSL space. They want the same offerings on mobile, and I don't think that's going to happen. The CRTC is not going to stick their foot in it that much, but they're definitely going to regulate something.
So then how do you see this, because that's kind of relating to what I was leading to before, how do you see this playing out with the hearings that we're going to be seeing in September?
Yeah, they're going to be asking a lot of questions. They're going to be figuring, is it good business to regulate domestic roaming if it means that the incumbents are they're not going to play ball in other ways. So they're going to try and get around it in some ways, or they're going to threaten that they're not going to expand. The big thing right now is that the incumbents say, okay, well, if you want us to expand into rural areas, you have to make spectrum cheaper, and you have to incentivize us. You have to tell we've already rolled out networks to 97% of the Canadian population. If you want us to roll out LTE to the remaining 3%, make it worth our while. And what it seems like is that the CRTC is like, screw you guys. The government gave you a ton of spectrum in the 90s, and you've been taking advantage of it. So now we're going to make it easier for the new entrants to kick some ass, and as they should. But it means that there's going to be this tense relationship going forward between the CRTC, the Harper government, and the incumbents.
Okay, so you just mentioned something interesting, is where, is the CRT, how far is the CRTC willing to push this with the understanding that if they push it too far, it might make negotiations for other things difficult? Because I think the other big story that kind of popped up in the past week is the questions that the CRTC is asking Rogers, Bell, and Videotron over mobile TV.
Right.
Which is a big deal in Canada, because this is kind of a backdoor entry into a broader argument over net neutrality, specifically around the multimedia services that we all probably use more than anything other than cat GIFs.
Yeah, if they start regulating cat GIFs, I quit the internet.
Oh my god.
Specifically dog GIFs. I don't care about cats. Dogs is where it's at. I know you guys are cat lovers and actually probably have cats very near you right now.
Hot take here on Mobile Syrup, dog GIFs are where it's at. We had a great bear GIF going around the channel the other day.
Oh, I love that bear GIF. I'll post it. I'll post it in the article if you want to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this whole idea that the CRTC is kind of stepping in where they didn't used to this is a good example of this is by questioning Bell, Rogers, and Videotron over their mobile TV practices. And if you're not familiar with this, what it means is that if you've heard of Bell TV, Rogers Anyplace TV, or Illico, which is Videotron's mobile TV service, right now they do not charge you based on the amount of bandwidth that you use. So if you have a 6 gig plan or a 1 gig plan, it doesn't matter. You will not exceed your monthly bandwidth allotment because they don't charge you by the megabyte, they charge you by the hour. So they say for $5 a month you get 10 hours of watching. It doesn't matter what quality you watch in or what content you watch, whether it's an old SD show or a new 1080p show, they'll keep everything up. And now the CRTC is questioning, saying, well, why are you doing this for your own apps and not for apps like Netflix or YouTube? So that's the big question. Yeah,
and it goes to, on the surface it seems fairly innocuous, because as maybe a Bell customer, you'd be like, hey, this is really cool. They're giving this doesn't go against my data cap. I can just watch TV and not worry about it. But the problem is that our wireless service providers in Canada are also our multimedia entertainment providers. So you have a situation where if there's an incentive towards people sticking with Bell because they get a better hourly show rate, meanwhile Netflix on Bell, like Netflix is worried about having to pay Bell to be at a standard speed, or worried that, as I did this month, oh my God, just trying to go through 7 seasons of The West Wing blew through my my data limit like halfway through the month. It pushes people towards another service that Bell offers in its portfolio, which is maybe not as problematic as what Netflix is facing in the U.S. where they're having to pay Time Warner and Comcast just to hit a certain speed ratio, but the end result is the same, where consumers are pushed towards another service than the one they would choose if data speeds and data was seen as a utility rather than a pricing point.
Right, and I don't. So what's interesting here is that neither Netflix nor YouTube are facilitators of live television, or at least not yet. But Bell TV, more so than any other, because Bell really pushes mobile TV on their monthly plans. They are incentivizing users, and they even claim that Bell has 1.2 million subscribers to mobile TV. And the CRTC is asking, are these actual subscribers, or are they, auxiliary subscribers that have been opted in when they sign up for a monthly plan? Similar to the way that Google counts their Google Plus active users. Google Plus has X number of million active users, but you can't actually sign in and comment on anything on YouTube without being a Google Plus user. Mm-hmm. So it's very misleading. So Bell is obviously the most egregious example here, but Rogers and Videotron are also saying we just want to give consumers an opportunity to try out our services. They're not saying that we want to continue this going forward, and even today Rogers backtracked on its proposal to only to charge by the hour. So as of August 18th, which is a couple of days ago, right?
Yeah,
they are now charging via. They are now charging by the megabyte rather than the hour. So Rogers has even reversed this decision, and it's only a matter of time before Bell and Videotron do the same thing. But if they're going to cave so quickly, it speaks to the fact that they recognize that this was not exactly a kosher practice.
Well, so there's two sides to that, right? Because I also do buy what they're saying, and we had this in our write-up, that part of their argument is that, like, mobile TV is so nascent that they're just experimenting with things to onboard people to it to string some value from it. So experimenting with the pricing and options to see if people view how they're willing to pay for mobile TV differently than how they pay for, say, access to the internet via their phone. I get that, but I'm also really happy that the CRTC is stepping in now, recognizing what's happening in the U.S. and not letting this get too far before we're having to overturn some pernicious practices against the idea of net neutrality after the fact. I like that they're stepping in earlier enough to set the stage for how Canadians will get to use data and wired services.
Do these applications come, like, to get access to the Bell TV app? Do you have to be a Bell TV customer, or is it any Bell mobile customer? So I feel like that's where
it depends upon the app. We've written about this before, where depending on the carrier's app or what TV app you're using, because sometimes they'll have like a Bell TV app, but then there's like a Sports Center app, okay, with different options. We actually have to do like we got to do a comparison of all the offerings on the site just to clean it up. So it is something where some of the apps you don't have to be a specific customer of the carrier to use it. Whereas some where you have to use your login, but also the experience of the streaming and what's offered for that varies greatly depending upon the app, right? This isn't, a lot of the reasons why something like Netflix is so compelling is you're like, oh, hey, I'm going to give you this many dollars a month, and then you just give me all the content in this really easy way. Like, it's another example of, I think, the telecom approach to presenting entertainment information just doesn't work, or consumers are even less willing to have, a list of pricing points or options, or, okay, well, I use this app for this show, and then I'm going to watch Hockey Night in Canada on this app, and then because I'm a customer, like they want the simplicity of saying, I pay for the utility, I want the entertainment,
Right, yeah. But there's a difference. So Bell actually differentiates between non-TV subscribers and TV subscribers. So if you're not a Bell TV subscriber, and by Bell TV I mean at-home satellite or FIBE, you don't get access to a number of shows. So I have a list here. You don't get access to AMC, ABC, Bravo, whatever. Most of the channels that you get access to on mobile are ones that you could already get over the air using a digital antenna, such as CBC, CTV, City. It's basically what's it called? Something carrier. The word escapes me, but common carrier. So any channel that's part of the common carrier is going to be available on your mobile device. If you're already a subscriber, then you can access all these other channels that you would already have access to on your cable or satellite. So a lot of the U.S. channels and all of the premium channels as well. So Bell doesn't really differentiate that here. They're treating everything the same. The traffic is IP traffic. It's not coming over a satellite to your phone or whatever, like they do in Korea where they have those long antennas. But what's at stake here is not so much the fact that they're waiving the data. It's that they're saying that Rogers, Telus, Bell, Videotron, they say that they're at a spectrum crunch, that there's not enough spectrum to go around, and yet they're giving the spectrum, this bandwidth, away for free. They're saying, okay, we don't care how much you use as long as you pay us for the extra time. So it's $5 for 10 hours. It doesn't matter how much data you're using. The difference is that, in a way, we as paying cellular customers are subsidizing, in a way, their business model, because we're paying so much extra for the ability to get these premium LTE networks that are being crunched. And if 1.2 million was 11.2 million, we would have a much bigger problem on our hands. The fact that Bell says we only have 1.2 million mobile TV subscribers, which makes it not a very popular source of entertainment compared to Netflix and YouTube, that's fine and dandy now, but in 5 years, if the policy stood, that would be a whole different story.
So when does the upcoming NHL season start? Because that's when you're going to see shit hit the fan, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's on Rogers, and that's another point, is that what's Rogers going to do with their $5.2 billion 12-year exclusive NHL deal? They're certainly going to be pushing out tons of mobile content, and they're going to want to make it as easy for Rogers customers to watch it on their phones and tablets. So that's a good point. We don't know how they're going to integrate it, whether it's going to be part of Sportsnet, whether it's going to be part of Rogers Anyplace TV, because Rogers Anyplace TV was the only one exempt from the bandwidth limits, but using Sportsnet, using TSN Go, using CTV Go, using City TV, whatever, those weren't exempt. So how does that work?
Okay, so the NHL season starts this year Wednesday, October 8th. Game between the Habs and the Leafs, 7 o'clock. So I'm guessing by October 14th, we'll have a really good idea of how excited Canadian customers are to pay for whatever way Rogers is going to present that content, right?
I'm actually kind of excited about it. I think, even though I'm not a huge hockey fan, I think that it's Rogers' big chance to really show that Guy Lawrence and Rogers 3.0 is turning the company around, and that they're actually using this huge deal for good rather than evil. If it turns out to be evil, I'll eat my shorts, but I really hope that they don't make it really hard to get good NHL content.
But if this investigation, so yeah, I'm just reading the comments on this, and it seems like a significant portion of the comments on this post are saying, like, if CRTC basically says that they can't do this and decides they're not playing fair, Rogers and Bell are just going to charge customers for it. And isn't that almost worse? That it's like, well, now you have to pay for this, even though you're a Rogers cable customer, you're a Rogers phone customer, you have to pay for the privilege of using this app on your phone.
But that's no different. It's not a matter of who owns the content. It's not a matter of who owns the network. It's who owns the content. So Rogers owns the licensing, but they can license, they can sub-license the content to Telus and Bell if they want to. Bell owns CTV, but you can get CTV streaming on your Rogers Anyplace TV app. Videotron owns Sun, but you can get Sun Network on your Rogers and Bell TV app, right? Like it's no different.
Right.
So it'll be I mean, yes, they'll charge Bell a lot of money for streaming, and they may pass that cost along to the customers. But that's Rogers' whole point. If you want the best NHL experience, change to Rogers. We're going to make it great for you.
It's almost as if it becomes really problematic when 3 companies in Canada own all the sports teams and the TV channels and the digital data infrastructure at the same time. It's almost as if that is something that creates problematic situations for consumers.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. Just it just kind of came to me.
Imagine a world like that existing.
Although, to be fair, and I'm gonna shout out to The Verge here because our commenters love it when we do that.
Shout out to The Verge, one of our favorite sites.
They've been covering this Comcast bullshit essentially since Ryan Block called into Comcast and had that awesome, terrible phone call. And if you haven't heard this customer service call, just look up Ryan Block Comcast on Google and you'll find it. It is amazing. It's 8 minutes of a Comcast retentions employee trying his best to prevent this guy from canceling his service.
It's the most in control of his emotions I've ever seen Ryan Block be, but that's the point.
It was, well, I mean, it was done for us, not him, but it was essentially proving why these huge cable monoliths should not be allowed to run monopolies in their respective service areas. And Comcast wants to buy is it Time Warner in certain parts of the country, and then they'll divest part of their service to Charter. Anyway, they're worse than we are. I mean, they have monopolies upon monopolies, and Comcast is one of the most hated companies in the world. Rogers gets a lot of flack, so does Bell, and sometimes Telus. But I think compared to Comcast and Verizon, we have it pretty good here. So.
Yeah. Again, we're running the false argument, like comparing ourselves to the U.S. is a straw man because no one wants the U.S. experience.
Right, except the Canadian carriers. They say that we're cheaper than the U.S. and they use the U.S. as a benchmark for pricing, which is not a good thing, but we digress. One other part of this week's CRTC equation is... well, it's not really a CRTC equation, but it's a legal equation. The Ontario Supreme Court of Justice has allowed a $100 million class action lawsuit against Bell's prepaid policies. Now, we're not going to spend a long time talking about this, but 2 years ago, a Bell prepaid customer complained that Virgin, which is Bell's subsidiary, basically canceled out her prepaid balance. And she bought a Bell prepaid card that said in the fine print that balance, if unused, expires after 30 days. She's arguing that they're gift cards, and under the Competition Act, gift cards are not allowed to expire. Now, it makes sense to me. Does it make sense to you? They shouldn't expire. You spent $30. Why would it expire after 30 days? That makes no sense. Jane?
Yeah, no, I'm just looking at this and catching up. So what's the difference between the gift card and the top-up card? Is it like a Bell gift card, or like
well,
I'm just trying to figure out what the difference between the top-up card and the gift card is?
The name?
Exactly.
So can that card? Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, can the card be used to buy anything else, or? No.
But under the Ontario Competition Act, gift cards are not allowed to expire. Bell is arguing that it's not a gift card, that it's specific to its services, and that you have a choice of buying a lower value, say $35, and having it expire after 30 days, or buying a higher value and having it expire after a year. Now, this is not dissimilar to most other companies. It's just that she's picking on Bell for this. So, I don't know.
I feel like if they have a gift card that's specifically and like limited to buying top-ups, then I feel like she's totally right. I feel like that shouldn't expire. I think it's a dick move for them to wipe out that balance and say that, oh, well, technically it's a top-up card when it's very clearly a different product.
But it's like if you went to Shoppers and bought Xbox points. And
and I feel like they I don't know what their motivation is for offering both a top-up, like an option for top-up versus, like, as well as a gift card. But I feel like if they're gonna, I feel like it's kind of like a money grab to be like, oh, you can either buy like this in certain denominations, or you can buy, whatever. It's like, I don't know if it's how it works. Is it whatever value you want of gift card? Is that why people do it?
Well, exactly. I mean, you buy. It's just convenience, right?
Yeah. So I don't know why if they're gonna do that, then I see no problem with customers taking advantage of it and saying, hey, I'm gonna buy a gift card that I can kind of just load up and like chip away.
It's not torture. It's enhanced interrogation. It's definition without distinction to bypass law.
Okay, so somebody makes a good point. A commenter on the article, Pierre, he says prepaid cards when purchased don't expire. The number on your receipt is valid until it's applied to your account. It's only once that balance is in your account that it has an expiry date. That's how Bell gets around this argument that it's not a gift card, because when you have it in your possession and it's inactive, it doesn't expire. It never expires. But the problem is, if you buy a $100 gift card and you use $90 of it, there's $10 left and you can use it whenever. But when you buy a Bell prepaid card, you can't apply only like $50 of $100 of the card. You have to apply it all to your account at once.
So when you can't use it and it's useless,
they argue that it costs money for them to maintain your account, so that's why they have it expire.
Oh my God. Okay.
That is gross.
It costs money.
So a lot of people think that she's going to win this case. I mean, it basically it went through the appeal court. Bell appealed the action and they lost. So now it's gone up to the Supreme Court, and I believe the court date begins sometime next year. So we'll come back to it when it's gone to trial. But or do these things even go to trial? I guess they do. There's no. It's a civil case, so I don't know enough about this, but maybe we can get Nilay Patel on here next week to talk about it. What do you think, Doug?
About Canadian law? I think he'd love to.
Yeah.
Are we going to talk about Shaw trying to sell AWS spectrum to Rogers?
Denied.
They don't think they're going to. They think that they think they're good. They think they'll be okay.
No, they're not. They're not going to be okay.
I think they're going to tell them to screw off, and that they can't do it.
Well, they told Telus to screw off with Mobilicity. I don't see any difference here between Mobilicity and Telus and Shaw, and because the government considers Shaw a new entrant in the mobile space, which is a huge distinction, right? So.
But it's more who they're transferring to, right? It's got to be that who they're transferring to has to be a new entrant, and
that's exactly it. That they don't want to us. They don't want to allow Rogers to have undue concentration of spectrum. So basically Shaw has this option where they bought AWS spectrum in the 2008 auction, and they never used it because they decided to go with a Wi-Fi network instead of LTE. So now they went into a plan to sell the unused spectrum to Rogers, but the government's made it very clear that this isn't going to happen. So there's nothing there's nothing they can do. Period.
Denied.
So, let's move on. Let's talk about one of the cooler articles that none of us wrote this week. This was smart glasses get smarter with Mayo.
Mayo. It's gotta be Mayo.
Shout out Alex Kinsella.
Shout out Tom Emmerich. So Tom Emmerich wrote this awesome article about how the Mayo and a bunch of different smart glasses have combined to be amazing. So, Doug, why don't you take us through this?
It's the future. we were talking before about was it like 3 or 4 weeks ago about how the Mayo is basically the Power Glove without the 80s rad, and
totally.
This is just I don't know, the extension of that. So. Yeah, where do we want to, like, what was the most exciting thing that you saw on this piece in terms of working with the smart glasses?
Oh, the Recon Jet, like, totally the best example of anything So the Jet is also another Canadian, the Recon Instruments is a Canadian company based in Vancouver. They're making this amazing heads-up display, sort of like Google Glass, but a little bit more specialized for athletes and different verticals. And it's basically a pair of sunglasses that has a heads-up display that allows you to connect to a smartphone. It also allows you to see how fast you're going, how many calories you've burned, and it has an API so that developers can connect to it. But if you haven't seen it, this video just showing a bike messenger using Mio and the Jet is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It shows you.
Wasn't a fan of the whole bike messenger angle, but it does. I think it's probably the best way to show just the need for the use case of just a badass HUD, like.
Right. So if he wants to change something or activate something on the Jet, he can just move his arm left and right, which is way easier than touching the really small touchpad on the side of the Jet. So that's really what it comes down to.
So it's mixing Mio's capability for having kind of like gesture enabled, so no need to kind of like look down and see your hands gestures, with information-rich HUD displays where you don't have to be distracted from your like other sensory perception. So I guess the bike messenger example was probably the best because it's probably the only one where you're doing something at speed, you need information and full control of your appendages. That isn't like a military example.
Yeah.
But it's just like, this is like, forget mobile. The integration of hardware services like this is like the coolest thing that will be happening within the next 5 years. Like seeing these things Voltron together is very exciting.
So I also think that it speaks a lot to how Google really missed the mark when it came to Glass, because Google Glass relies on voice, and as we've learned from Google now with the Android Wear platform and with smartphones in general, it's really kind of awkward to use your voice in public places. So
I don't think it's going to be just as awkward though to be like waving around.
I don't. No, I think you
I
can
feel
make
like
the
it's perfect
gestures as
for, like,
sensitive as you want.
I think it's perfect for people like bike messengers where they're performing a task and need that kind of they need to be able to do that. But I think I don't know. I remember walking down the street in San Francisco using Android Wear for the first time and just like shouting into my wrist, and I'm sure I look like a moron.
Oh,
and
you did.
I
saw you.
I feel like this is not going to be. It's going to be worse. Like people are just going to be like.
The difference though is that Google Glass is a consumer-focused product, whereas a lot of the stuff that Mayo's working with is more vertical specific. So you might not, and like, I don't know, Tom might be the wrong guy to write about this stuff because he's always going to like fashion shows where he's wearing like LED ties and stuff. But it's more, these are more for people looking to perform specific.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
So
like, for functions like this, it's awesome. But then people like me who are like, oh my god, like I just want to be able to do that, even though I know that it will look so silly, and you're just gonna have a million people like me just bashing into people walking down the road because they think they need to be able to do this while they're crossing the street.
So, just to your point, I don't think that Google Glass was developed specifically for consumers. Yesterday, a company called Wearable Intelligence raised $8.4 million to create vertical apps for a specific vertical in the hospital space for Google Glass users and doctors. So, for example, doctors need patient information when they walk into a room. It combines the GPS of the Google Glass with the ability to see a patient's history and medication and stuff like that without needing to open a bunch of files and sit down at a computer. So it makes things a lot more personable, hopefully. I mean, that's the idea. But
sorry, it's not that Google Glass is only for consumers, but I think Google expects it to be a consumer device in the way that smartphones are for all consumers and then can be used for advanced things, where I think with like the Mio and some of this other stuff, we talked about this before, you're going to have a very specific reason or two to have a Mio. It's not going to be something that everyone buys, but the people that do own them are going to use the hell out of them, and it's going to make their jobs easier.
So let's talk about Lumia.
We got some hate in the.
Oh, we did.
Comments. Not hate, just more.
Okay, no, constructive, like.
Shout out Jeff Broussard.
Yeah.
About what?
This
Windows
is like,
Phone.
yeah.
Windows Phone.
They don't know why we're being so hard on Windows Phone.
Because
Let me pull it up.
Because it deserves it.
No.
See, that's those kinds of statements that
Is because we were less than specific about the frustrations that we have with Windows Phone in terms of the level of polish, which I think is important because now we have, I guess, can we say like a full rollout of 8.1 across Canada?
I don't know. Yeah, okay. And definitely all the high-end Lumia devices now have it, right?
Okay, so any device that people are probably still using
Right.
now has 8.1.
Well,
no, that's not true.
To go back to our previous discussion last week about most people who have Windows Phone devices that have like a budget phone, I feel like the number of people spending, hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a smartphone the majority of them are not buying like the Lumia 1020, which is their highest end device. I feel like a lot of them are buying like the budget phones. Anyway, that's not important. All the high-end phones have it.
But the reason that we're hard on Windows Phone is not because Windows Phone is a bad OS or that even, like, especially now, it lacks the features that iOS and Android does. It's that the app ecosystem, which is becoming more and more important, is just not there. And I would happily
Daniel needs Snapchat.
I don't need my Snapchat. But I do need my Slack. I do need my TD Canada Trust. I do need certain things. I do need my Twitter to have the same features as my iOS and Android versions, right? So we have a situation where Instagram, even though now it is on Windows Phone, doesn't even have video support.
Does it?
No, it doesn't even. It doesn't have the DM feature. It doesn't have video support. Right? It's been in beta since it launched. It hasn't really been updated. It's very buggy. So, people can defend Windows Phone all they want, but they know just as well as we do that there are very few first-party solutions for the big apps that everybody relies on.
But I don't think that wasn't his point. His point was we were saying, it's not as nice to use. Like when we went back to what we were talking about, like features that are well implemented versus poorly implemented.
Okay, so.
So he wasn't talking about. I don't think he would disagree. I don't think Jeff would disagree that.
Well, so one of the things that I was thinking about when we talked about this, beyond just the frustration with like app updates and issues with Phone Store just never working, and that's also like a Windows 8 thing, not just a Windows Phone 8. But notifications were like essentially broken on Windows Phone. They weren't useful.
Right. So now they have a notification center. It's called
Action Center.
It's actually pretty good. Let's talk about that because I want to address what we talked about last week. I don't wholly disagree with you that I don't wholly agree with you that it's a bad experience throughout. But at the same time, I've been a Google user for a long time, and it does depend on what ecosystem you're a part of. So if you're using an iCloud, backend, obviously you're going to want to use Apple. But obviously Apple begets iCloud rather than iCloud begets Apple. But more so, Google users will have a hard time transitioning over to Windows Phone. If you're already entrenched in the Microsoft world, if you use Outlook, if you use OneNote, if you use OneDrive, if you have a bunch of, if you use Skype, all that stuff, then Windows Phone will be a lot more attractive to you. But I think that the number of people who use those services is far fewer, and the difference is that Google goes out of its way to have a great experience on iOS. Google does not give a shit about Windows Phone because they don't think that the market is big enough. That is something to be that's something to take into account when you consider a Windows Phone today.
Yeah, and like you said, like the Instagram app has been in beta since it launched. It still doesn't have functionality for like the DM part or like the video support. So that's a problem with actually Instagram. That's like a problem with Instagram not giving enough of a shit about Windows Phone users.
Yeah, because it's their third or fourth string development team. Like the same with we covered the Facebook just got the ability to send voice messages, which has been like a core feature of all the other platforms for a while, right? So and Jay, I think you were even talking last week about the reason why you're going to stick with Nexus devices is just because of your fear of jumping off to another platform because you're just, you ride or die for the Googs.
Yeah, like the same commenter said that. He said, I think you guys might just be used to the way those work, but that doesn't make them more intuitive. And I think he has a point to an extent, but I'm going to say that that's Microsoft's fault because they were so late to the game anyway that people had already made their choice on iOS or Android, and you're going to have to offer an extremely smooth and intuitive experience to combat, like to get people to switch. And I don't think that even iOS is an amazing experience, I think, and I'm still not ready to switch. So I think to an extent it is a case of we're used to what we have now. And
no, I understand the point. So Jeff Broussard, shout out again, and we're not throwing shade your way, buddy. I love the participation, and your comment icon is one of the greatest I've ever seen in my entire life. So keep doing that. But it was more the idea of you can go pick up an Android phone, and it's crazy to figure out how to add a keyboard. Or we're not talking about like not being able to find specific features or a different way of doing things. We're talking about notifications were broken. Apps do not have feature parity. Things crash. It's wonky. Like specific things fundamental to the platform. So it's not that we're there are reasons why we don't become more familiar with it because it's not providing what we need. Now, Daniel, we're making a really good point about the Google services, and we're mostly all Google people, even though I'm for hardware more of an iOS user, and that causes me consternation. I think that one of the benefits of like Windows Phone for some people is if you're the person that's still rocking a Windows PC, that's where there's a market for you to get a Windows Phone device because you might have there's some good hooks there between the contacts and things that you'd have on your Windows PC, or maybe you have a Hotmail or an Outlook.com account. Like Microsoft at least has that a little bit of a broader stack than say someone like BlackBerry to be able to connect those services.
No, but hang on. That's not even true anymore. And I agree with you that ostensibly or on surface having a Windows PC and a Windows Phone, you have on that
Surface?
Surface. While you're crumping using your Surface, that you have a quote unquote better experience. But that's not true because Microsoft understands that it has 4% market share in the smartphone space. So it's now launching its services on iOS and Android. I can hear myself. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I can hear myself in somebody else's earphones. So, I mean, that's really important to note, is that Microsoft just released a huge OneNote update for Android. It's coming with, it has great Outlook apps for iOS and Android. You can sync your contacts if you're into that. So, these are things that are important to kind of keep in mind, that even Microsoft understands that Windows Phone needs work. But it's working hard, and I acknowledge that, and I think it's a way better product than it was 6 months ago. Just the apps, period. I'm sorry, they do.
Yeah, but so I'm. It's been a while. I just tossed a Lumia Jane's way, and there's a device that I'm excited to use to get reacquainted with Windows Phone 8.1 again, and that is the HTC One M8 for Windows Phone, which should have been called the HTC 8 M8, because that would have been cool.
W8. Or anything but the HTC M8 for Windows, or with Windows, or whatever it's called.
No, yes. I don't think it's called the HTC One M8.
Oh, come on.
Oh, fuck off.
Let's not get...
You were the reason. Someone else in the comments, shout out to, let me see, Evan Hindra told me, was it Evan that said, I don't know if it was Evan. Anyway, someone told me that I shouldn't hold back my Irish accent, and it's people like you who forced me to do that. People
I tease because I love. I love your
feel like love.
I do. I love your accent. I'm jealous of it because I used to have an accent of my own that I gave up.
True.
I know.
I think I was not a Rogers employee that said it.
Right.
So you were the reason our viewership has not quadrupled due to my accent.
Oh shit.
Okay. So the HTC One M8 with Windows Phone 8.1 is a device. First of all, I like HTC's hardware.
Yes.
I like looking at Windows Phone, not on a Lumia, because I'm just getting really tired of the hard taffy aesthetic. I'm gonna try this device when it comes out. I'm gonna spend some time with it and see if I can.
Hopefully it will. Sorry.
Well, so it's a quote unquote Verizon exclusive for 5 days or whatever, and then it's
Was it
coming
5
to
days?
other carriers. No, it's well. So the
Yeah,
story
your point is that there's only 4 months left in the year, so how can it be an exclusive? But
yeah,
if
it's a
okay,
Verizon
but
exclusive. Yeah.
Douglas, if it was the iPhone 6 and it was a Rogers exclusive at launch, would you consider it an exclusive if it wasn't coming anywhere else for 90 days or like 3 months, like 4 months? Would you
Well,
say that it's not an exclusive? You would just say that they just get it later than everyone else?
No, if it's an exclusive for a quarter and like one of the biggest quarters of the year for people to buy devices,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. But
Yeah.
I think the story is the other U.S. carriers are getting the device before the end of the year. So if this thing launches in September and other people are getting it before the year is up, that's not even a quarter. That's like a month and a half. So like great exclusive. I'm sure someone spent too much money on that. Regardless, if this device does come to Canada, I hope it does, because I really want to see. I want to see now Microsoft hardware running Windows Phone. I want to see if that can be my jam. I want to see if people respond to that.
Was it the X8? Like 2 years ago. That was non Nokia, non Microsoft hardware running this Windows Phone.
Oh, 8X. The
8X, not the
yeah.
X8. Yeah.
That was actually a nice phone.
It was a lovely phone. There you go, Doug.
So
excited.
I would like to see the M8 for Windows here. I mean, I love the M8. I think it's my favorite Android phone. I also like that they kept it very much an HTC phone. They have they have blink feed. They have the dual camera setup.
Why don't they have Zoe? That's what I want to know.
They might. I mean, they might come out with Zoe. It's probably
that's weird though, because they made such a huge deal with Zoe at the M8 launch, and they're going on about how it's blink feed and all that kind of stuff. But it's just weird that it's not there. You think they could have pulled that one out of the bag?
But you have to remember that it took them 6 months to bring Zoe to Android.
Yeah, but presumably they knew they were making a Windows Phone version of the M8. I don't know. I just want to know where their priorities are. Making Zoe for a phone that is not HTC branded, or making Zoe for a phone that is HTC branded. H.
Well,
I don't know.
No, you go. Yeah, I think they might want to see if the thing sells first, or it might come in a future update, or it might just be there. Like, so they confirmed it, but there's going to be an event soon where we'll be able to play with this. So they might just have it ready in there, right? But regardless, so do we want to talk at all about, just because we talked about whether or not this device is coming to Canada? I know a lot of the time we see in the comments Canadian carriers are more apt to cherry pick which specific either Windows Phone or Lumia devices kind of arrive. And do you think that this is something that Canadian carriers would be willing to pick up, and if so, whom?
Well, no. So that's the other thing, is that I remember when we went to New York last year for the Moto X launch, and everybody went crazy because it was a Rogers exclusive. But what Motorola told me is that it wasn't the fact that they didn't shop it around to Bell and Telus. It was just that nobody else wanted it. Rogers was the only company willing to put marketing dollars behind it, and that's really the most important thing to note. So I think it's similar here. They probably shopped it around, and somebody said, okay, well, Nokia is really the only company that has any cachet in the Windows Phone market, and we just don't think it'll sell. It may come here. It may come when it's cheaper, and there's enough volume that HTC can say, okay, well, we'll give it to you for $500 per unit instead of $700 per unit.
Oh my God! I would never. Sorry, I just you keep talking about who's going to buy it and is it going to sell, and I know we talked about this last week, but no, it's not. This is. I think the price, whatever they price it at for off contract, is going to be exorbitant.
Well, it's always exorbitant because that's the price of a flagship phone.
Not if you buy a Nexus phone.
But that's not even true, because Google is subsidizing the cost of the Nexus phone. It's not that the Nexus phone is.
But I'm talking about buying it off contract.
Right.
And you don't sign a contract with Google.
You don't, but you do sign I mean, the Nexus 5 cost $500 at the carriers because they spent more to buy it from LG directly. Google probably got a deal with LG. because of the shared marketing costs and stuff that allowed
But
the
it's still off
developers.
contract. It's still off contract and considerably cheaper.
Sure, right, and we've seen a lot of cheaper devices coming out as a result of that. So the Moto X was only $400 outright. The Moto G was only $225 outright. There was a big market.
Regardless, I think that whatever they price this at, it's going to be like a Windows Phone 8. Yeah, goes back to what I said. I think people buying Windows Phone devices are people who are looking for budget phones. Are you getting hot and bothered talking about Windows Phone?
I'm getting bothered because there's no air in my apartment.
It's just sad because we said this last week that if HTC is having a hard time selling great Android hardware or well-made Android hardware, they're not going to have an easier time selling the same version of the device for Windows Phone. The only market that I could see for this are those people that are interested in Windows Phone and just for the life of them don't want to use the Lumia. It's just too weird. It's just too outside their expectations. So, I don't think that's a huge market, but it's I don't know. It's just sad. Every time we talk about HTC, it's just Gary Oldman sad.
Agreed. Although Gary Oldman has the best accent in the world.
Oh, you're not going to slag him off. I bet he says H2.
He does. That's why I loved it. I was actually being serious. I tease because I love. So let's talk about another phone that we want to know whether people are going to buy, the Blackberry Passport. We've spoken about this a lot over the last couple of months. We've seen leaked photos of it, we've seen leaked videos of it, but now we actually got to see it ourselves, and we got some videos, some photos with it, and we can now confirm that it is going to launch on Telus. So this is going to be one of the bigger releases in Canada, at least, in the next month. And we also saw a leaked video of it from Carphone Warehouse, which is a big UK retailer. So what do you guys think? I mean, now that we're almost at the point where it's going to be launched, is this still sort of an oddity to you? Is it becoming more attractive? Is it becoming less attractive knowing that it's going to be offered with Android apps instead of BlackBerry OS apps?
It's weird. I think I know that I was really super critical of the fact that BlackBerry, when they first talked about this device, I think you and I counted, Daniel, where they were blogging about it like every third or fourth day. After it, they would put up a new blog post on the BlackBerry blog about this phone, and I was like, we get it, it's not even out yet, shut up, stop. But I think having seen it, so much of it over the last few weeks, I'm kind of getting used to how it looks, and it doesn't look so weird to me anymore. So I wonder if that's their ploy, is that people won't be so weirded out by it when they see it, that it's not gonna be weird. Because I'm looking at it now and it doesn't look half as weird as I used to think it did.
Yeah, I think that's the case with any phone, but I do think it's a very strange-looking device. It's
it's not looking.
Yeah, and it's too bad that Ian isn't here to talk about it, because I remember he was saying that he really thought that the trackpad keyboard was pretty cool, but that the keys were a little not so good, and that you got to two-hand it. This is not a one-hander device. Which
and he also said that because he's got an iPhone 5S, is it? And or an iPhone 5, and he uses his phone with one hand, but he said he automatically just used it with two hands, and it wasn't a case of, I can't use this in one hand. It was just something that he did intuitively. He just used two hands straight away. So I hope that means that it's comfortable to use. It's not awkward. But
and Ian's got little baby hands,
he does.
smaller even than
the
mine.
Delicate hands of a lady.
If he can hold on to that sucker, then there's a good chance that I can. I don't know. This is another device that I'm interested in trying. The Amazon App Store gives it a good shot in terms of apps, and let's just see how it goes. You gotta try it, man. It's the most interesting piece of hardware coming out. What other phone is any manufacturer making where you're like, whoa, I gotta see what that's like.
Yeah, one of the commenters said that it looks like a Pop-Tart, and it totally does.
Okay, you're basically calling it the equivalent of a vaudeville act. It's interesting.
It's a total freak show. It's a sideshow. I just want to have it just so I can be look at my phone. It's so weird looking.
Right, but I think that there are far more interesting phones coming out this year than the BlackBerry Passport. I mean, I can't wait to try it, but at the same
time... What are you looking forward to?
The iPhone 6.
It's like the last iPhone. It's going to look exactly like that one. Not exactly. It's going to look like the last one, but like slightly different. Or they're going to make it look like the first iPhone, and it's not going to be like the new iPhone will look more similar to the last one than this does to any other device. Like this is unlike anything that we've seen before.
No, just because it looks different doesn't mean it's more interesting. It's what I can do with the phone that interests me.
So you're saying you're excited by iOS 8?
I'm excited by the potential hardware improvements that they have on the iPhone 6. I think that the Galaxy Note 4 is also going to be a very interesting phone. I think that the Moto X Plus 1 is going to be a very interesting phone. I think.
You think the Moto X Plus 1 is going to be interesting?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think that it's going to be, if they have anything close to what the Moto X had last year with active notifications and the touchless controls, then I think it's going to be a huge piece of technology. I geek out over that stuff.
You're just going to be excited for all of September. That's what you're going to be.
I'm also going to be traveling from all of September, basically.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, if any of the podcasts in September, Daniel seems kind of bitchy or crabby, it's because he's going to be perpetually on this international waters time zone where he doesn't know what time it is.
More bitchy and crabby than usual. Let's be honest.
More unreasonable than usual.
Oh come on! You just insulted Ian's hands while he wasn't here.
You guys, I have a bone to pick. You guys, last week, my camera cut out, my audio cut out, and I came back, and you guys said you were saying nice things about me, and you weren't. You were just slagging me off for going on holidays.
No, that's because we were jealous.
Saying terrible things about you.
What?
I think I specifically said I was saying terrible things about you.
Yeah, Daniel lied right to my face, though.
No, to your camera. Anyway, let's talk about the last topic of the day. Doug, why don't you tell us about BlackBerry Technology Solutions and why this is important for the company?
It's important for the company because we keep seeing it's like the final phase of the restructuring, but it's them arranging. John Chen's about a portfolio, and this is the long-term piece of BlackBerry's portfolio. So this includes QNX. It includes the Cloud Business Division, all their Internet of Things, Project Ion stuff. It's being run by the former CTO of Sony Ericsson.
Sandeep, right?
Yes. I'm not even going to take a stab at that last name. So you can read it. You can read our posts. It's them trying to kind of in a way that they were doing with BBM before Chen, but in a much smarter way, position packages within the company which have very clear responsibilities. Now, some might say that also makes it easier to derive a valuation of BlackBerry's worth piece by piece. So if, God forbid, the mobile gods forbid, they do get stripped and sold for parts, it's very easy to separate the high-performing or the high-value pieces of the portfolio from the low-performing pieces. But it's great. This a part of a company that has the kind of like the long-term swing now has a very senior and experienced person, and he has 73 patents himself, which I find interesting.
Was he president of? Yeah, he was like
Ericsson Mobile.
Yeah, but he was there when they split, like when they were stripped apart from Sony, right? Shinekeshu was.
I don't know, but what I do know is that I think that you're right, Doug. This is them putting their ducks in a row, but I also think that it makes for a much more compelling place when all of BlackBerry's really smart engineers and smart R&D people and a lot of their sort of Waterloo-based product managers are in one building talking about really smart things that have nothing to do with the enterprise and have nothing to do with handsets. This is an opportunity for them to become like IBM in many ways, and I think that's a huge opportunity because there's
not necessarily nothing to do with the enterprise, but yeah. And I think a lot of these guys are actually based out of Ottawa because that's where a lot of the QNX people are. But yeah, I think you're right. Like I think this you could call this like this is a little bit like ATAP. This is BlackBerry's ATAP.
Right. which is great because that's what they need.
Yeah.
So yeah, Paratech is the company that created the great audio, the audio chips inside the Z30, which provided some of the best audio of any smartphone we've heard. QNX is powering AirPlay or CarPlay, Apple's CarPlay, which is awesome. So yeah, it'll be good. I think we're sort of petering out, so let's wrap this up. You guys wanna close with anything? You excited about anything for the next couple of weeks?
I'm afraid there's going to be a lot of new phones. I don't know. I'm afraid. Yeah.
You're afraid?
Yeah, there's going to be so
afraid.
much happening in September that I'm going to be on overload. I think I'm probably going to buy way more, like more shit that I don't need because I'm going to be just on a complete overload of new stuff.
Oh, that's the fun part.
Feel compelled to buy some of it.
That's my favorite part of the year.
What are you excited about? Apart from iOS 8 and the Moto X Plus 1.
Drinking a beer.
Are you doing that right now, Daniel?
Oh, I finished mine.
Yeah.
Gonna get another
That's what
one.
Daniel means when the podcast is petering out, is that his beer's done.
He's done. He needs to pee.
I think it's really interesting that I want to go back and see. So we've had 2 podcasts now. Last week specifically, which was really hardware focused, and then the second half of this podcast is pretty hardware focused, looking to maybe like second tier hardware. How our anticipation of these devices and our expectations of what's going to be delivered are different a month from now when we have the full announcements, or at least some or most of the devices in our hands. And this is Christmas in September for mobile hardware, and it'll be interesting to see what lives up to the hype.
None of it will. I don't expect to be like blown away by anything that is announced.
Okay, yeah, I was so lazy there. But so what devices? Like the only device that is even hyped is the iPhone 6. It's the only one that actually has like a rumor mill or anything like that. So are there even devices anymore that can sustain hype, or is it is our interest now based upon things like I'm way more excited to try a device that looks weird and reminds me of like 2006 when all the hardware manufacturers were just doing weird phones.
Like Nokia and the taco phone, yeah.
Then like using a device I know is going to be good, but is essentially an evolution of what I've been using for years, right? So I get what you were saying, Daniel, before about like, you're from a very strongly analytical bent, seeing it's interesting to see how these devices go into the market, how specific features are used. I just want to like, if there were devices in a row, the first one that I would probably try is the Passport, just to feel it.
It's like, nobody wants to wear like the feather boa and the top hat outside, but it's like you're drawn to it straight away, like the weird stuff. Like it's not an everyday phone. It's like it's one of those weird like.
See, that makes no sense to me. I would never want a phone that I would not want to use. I would want a phone that I could put in my pocket and rely on every day, because that's what phones are for. They're not sideshows. They're not things that you look at. They're things that you use.
That's the thing. They've become such a like they're just a commodity now. Like it doesn't need to be exciting or sexy. It just needs to do what you want it to do. And it's like I've stopped hoping that someone's gonna release something that doesn't look like the same candy bar touchscreen like form factor that I'm used to. And maybe like HTC did it where they have like they have really nice build quality, but that's the most exciting thing you can hope for is like super sexy build quality, and otherwise it pretty much looks exactly the same as everything else.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that Jane is volunteering to use the Blackberry Passport full time.
Oh yeah, I'll do it.
Once it comes out.
I'll do it I'll do my year with the Passport if you want.
You heard it here first. Jane will be doing the review of the Passport. Okay, so on that note, we will.
Why does every podcast end with you assigning me some shitty job, like waiting at midnight at the Apple Store or doing a review of like the BlackBerry Passport?
Because that's what you get yourself into when you.
Boy.
You're gonna have a very busy September, Jane.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the midnight launch with the Passport.
Yeah, that would work.
Document the iPhone 6 launch with the BlackBerry Passport.
I think it has a 13 megapixel camera, so you should be fine.
Yeah.
So, SyrupCast listeners, if you want Jane to do these things, please leave a message in the comments.
Don't
We are
encourage
reading
them.
Oh, I'm going to encourage them.
They don't have any interest in my well-being. We love getting comments on the SyrupCast.
Makes us feel special.
Yep.
All right. Thanks again, everybody, for listening in if you got here. And we'll talk to you next week. All right. Bye now.